Productions. KCTV5's look back at 50 years of broadcast excellence.
Tonight, KCTV celebrates a half a century in broadcasting. Good evening, I'm Katie Horner, and for the next hour, we'll look back at the events that shaped not only KCTV, but also Kansas City. From radio, black and white and color, to videotape and film, 50 years ago, television was in its infancy. But KCTV, Kansas City's television, was there. This station covered the good and the bad in the area's history. From the collapse of the Hyatt Skywalks to the Royals winning the World Series, KCTV5 brought it to you live. But we weren't always KCTV5. In the beginning, we were KCMO Radio.
Remodeling on our building at 31st and Grand was begun to accommodate TV studio, TV control, projection room for film, and other visual aids. A television antenna was hoisted to the top of our existing 300-foot tower that already held the FM antenna. We were ready, and the FCC granted us our permit to go on the air. We'd assembled a television crew of cameramen, TV directors, projectionists, switchers, stagehands, announcers. Then for a practice run, we put on programs every day for a week, just for ourselves. We operated the new equipment and got used to being a television station before we went on the air. Dedication Day came, and we went on the air with a dedication program. President Truman came and spoke. After Dedication Day, KCMO TV started regular daily programming. We started our day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and stayed on the air till after midnight. We worked on five hours of live TV programs. We had no sources of pictures except cameras, TV cameras, live television, and film. That was a pleasure for us. We loved TV.
Also in 1953, a man named Harold Inslee brought a new meaning to the term another fish story. With a sportsman's friend, he turned a hobby and a passion into a career that lasted 48 years.
Now here he is in one of his rare appearances on television, the sportsman's friend, Harold Inslee.
Thank you, Don Warney.
Howdy, Harold. How are you?
Hi again, everybody.
Hi again, everybody.
I always said hi again, everybody. Don was my announcer for how many years, Don?
We started together in '64 on Channel 5, so it was a few years we did that, probably for about 30 years, I guess, 35 maybe. Well, you know, television in those days was really fun. We had anything that could go wrong, we had to go wrong, because we were, in the early days of the Inslee Show, we were live right before the 10 o'clock news.
Well, really, I think we had probably some of the first color.
We had the first live color in Kansas City that we know of, yeah.
And Don, we did 52 shows a year, too, back in those days.
Right. None of that 13 weeks and then take off for 3 months. We didn't do that. Remember, in the early film days, you used to have to stop what we were doing when we were fishing and wind the camera because it would only run a few feet of film. The thing about fishing and doing it that way was you'd be fishing and trying to catch a fish, and Harold was shooting 90% of the film he shot himself. He had the camera in his hand. But we never faked any of that, never put the fish back in the water and did take two or anything like that. It was always, whatever was happening is what we did.
Well, the thing about it was, we couldn't afford to keep that camera running like they can with tape today. They can go out there and keep it on a guy till he gets a fish. We couldn't do that. We had to sit there and wait till he hooked a fish, and consequently it was hard for us to show that the guy actually hooked the fish. Yeah. But we never faked anything for anybody. People
say, well, I remember you when you were with Harold Inslee. And I said, well, that's good. I'm glad you remember that far back. They say, how old's old Harold? And I said, I don't know. He won't tell me. Are you going to tell them?
Sure, I'll tell you. I'll be 92 in November.
Yeah, nice to have. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I think, though, about those old tarpon, about Sandy catching her big one, it gets my fishing fever high. And when Inslee gets his fishing fever high, anybody asks where he is, say the last you saw him, he had gone fishing.
KCTV5 is now known for its live, late-breaking newscasts, but that wasn't always the case. The first newscast at KCTV5, then KCMO, were far from live and late-breaking. Harold Mack, a former news director, describes them as subtle and informative.
When KCMO TV went on the air for the very first time, I was one of about a half dozen members of the news department. Jim Monroe is rehearsing for the 4 o'clock news. That's me behind the desk for the 6 o'clock news, with Floyd Finch, a stagehand, handling the so-called flip cards, which contain news pictures we used. The next picture shows Larry Findlay on the set of the 6 o'clock news, again with Finch on the flip cards. Big Tony Williams doing sports. Tony later moved to California and was succeeded by Bruce Rice. Hugh Bowen did the weather at 6 o'clock. However, the most recognizable weatherman was Bill Yearout, who taught himself to write backwards on a plexiglass map so the words and numbers were readable for the viewers. We found Polaroids, which of course needed no developing, the fastest way to get news pictures into the studio and on the air. This picture was taken a few years after we first went on the air. The studio newscasts at that time were very basic. A desk, a camera, a chair, a picture in the background. There were no such things as videotape. We also didn't have teleprompters, so the newscasters tried to memorize as much of the script as they could and read the written script in front of them.
2 more polio cases were reported in Kansas City today, raising the count for the year to 203. The latest victims are 2-year-old Cynthia Clark of 1235 Highland and 16-year-old Claire Ethel Brown of 2634 Euclid. And we leave you with this thought for the day. In the modern supermarket, you can find almost anything you want except your kids when you're ready to leave. That's the top of the news to now. Harold Mack reporting from Broadcasting House, hoping to see you at 6 tomorrow night. Coming up next, Bill Yearout and word of pleasant weather ahead.
It was in our election coverage where the lack of sophisticated equipment was most noticeable. For instance, on this election night, I'm airing some returns from the newsroom, and you'll note the names and vote figures are on an ordinary menu board. You can imagine how cumbersome it was to update the vote totals throughout the evening. Those early years were very far from sophisticated operation of today. There was a lot of hard work, but we also had a lot of fun, and I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. Good luck to KCMO-TV in the next 50 years.
It's a Kansas City landmark, the KCTV5 broadcast tower. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, a microwave signal is transmitted from the television station in Fairway to the broadcast tower at 31st and Grand. The tower was built in 1955 and is one of the tallest self-supporting structures in the world, larger than the Eiffel Tower. 1,360 lights illuminate the structure every night, and it takes an average man about an hour to climb to the top. But many Kansas Cityans know it as the place to stay away from after an ice storm. Kansas Cityans grew up knowing KCMO-TV, but in 1983, when the station decided to change its call letters, some people couldn't get used to the change, while others thought it was a stroke of genius.
The best call letters that I felt for the station that time that would totally talk about us being a part of Kansas City and the entire Kansas City marketplace was KC, Kansas City TV Television. Those call letters were owned by a station in San Angelo, Texas. What took place was a little bit of just horse trading, and that's very normal in our business. It's not normal to change call letters, but when you do, if someone's giving something up, you should pay them in some form. And that basically cost us, I think, somewhere around $50,000. When you think about it, it's not a whole lot of money when you're buying your identity, and that's how we became KCTV, which I believe is one of the clearest identifying call letters in the country.
The transition was pretty smooth. Everybody caught onto it right away, and boy, in no time, it was kind of hard to remember that we had been KCMO. It seemed like we'd always been KCTV.
It's exciting to be able to say, I work for KCTV. That means I work for the Kansas City television station. So even though I was disappointed at the first, gee, we're leaving KCMO behind, we picked up, I think, better call letters than KCTV because that's Kansas City television.
Tonight, it's all about memories. Sit down and think of some of your own, because when we come back, we'll talk with 2 people who made some history of their own right here on KCTV5.
I looked at Wendall as my mentor.
I was old even then.
No, you were not.
Makes no difference where I go, you're the best hometown I know. Hello, Kansas City. Hello, KCTV5 loves you. Makes no difference where I go, you're the best hometown I know. Hello, Kansas City. Hello, KCTV5 loves you.
Wendall Anschutz and Ann Peterson started anchoring together back in 1979, and they saw more of each other in the next 25 years than they did their own families.
I took a risk at that time to take a very young talent and reporter, Ann Peterson, and made her the anchor with Wendall Anschutz. It worked. They became the longest running anchor team in the country for the amount of time they were on the air together.
I think that the two of them together made a great team because they were both genuine, they were both, what you saw was what you got.
They were always bugging you every Thursday and Friday, what's going to happen Saturday or Sunday. So sometimes even if it looked like bad weather, I'd always tell them, it looks okay, Annie. It looks okay, Wendall.
I came here in April 1979, and I really looked at Wendall as my mentor, and I think that respect and admiration, I think, just grew over the years, and because I was as green as the Kentucky bluegrass when I started at the age of 23.
And Ann brought this incredible enthusiasm to the set. I mean, you know, I think it was good because I could use a little punch once in a while.
The highlight for me is the fact that we really broke all the records, Wendall. I mean, we, as the longest running anchor team in the country.
Well, it's a pretty good testament to what a good team we were and how compatible we were, and people seemed to enjoy us.
Today's award-winning KCTV5 News at Noon evolved from a television magazine show. Running for several years on KCTV5, it was known as the Noon Edition. One of its hosts, KCTV5's Leanna Joyce.
Noon Edition was a fixture in the Kansas City market. Everyone watched Noon Edition if you were home at noon. When I started, it was Chuck Davis and John Yates and myself. And it was a really fun show. I kind of resisted taking the job because I'd been in news for several years, and I considered myself a hard news person. I covered tornadoes and presidents. I didn't interview movie stars and do cooking shows, but I quickly found out that it's a lot more fun.
Barry Manilow has been singing and writing the songs for 6.5 years now. He's currently in the midst of
one of the first people I interviewed was Barry Manilow. Now, you know, how good can it get, really? But Noon Edition was a fun show because it was very loose, very informal. I would read the news, Chuck Davis would do the sports, we would do some interviews, John Yates did the weather. Once John Yates left, it was Chuck and I, and we had a great thing going. Chuck was just a wonderful person to work with. He never let an ego get in the way. We just had a great time. One of the things that we were most proud of was something we called Live Fridays. The live technology was just getting portable, and the news director at the time decided that he would give that live camera to us on Noon Edition. So every Friday we would go out to a local company, Starlight Theater, General Motors, Fairfax plant, Cake Box Bakery, and we would do our entire program live from that location. We would go behind the scenes and show at Cake Box how they decorated the cakes, the big vats, the assembly line at the Fairfax plant, backstage at Starlight. It was really fun to do, and I think it really gave our viewers something, an insight into different companies in the Kansas City area that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Coming up, find out why Kansas Cityans couldn't wait for KCTV5 to fade to black.
Shawnee Mission Parkway. Now, who's going to buy that? In the first place, while there is a Johnson County, there's no such thing as Shawnee Mission.
There is no Shawnee Mission?
There's a Shawnee Mission post office, there's a city of Shawnee and a city of Mission, but there's no Shawnee Mission.
Here's two television fans who can't agree on anything.
Ricardo Montalban, sexy? Yeah. Well, I guess if you're on Social Security. Oh, come on. Now, Travolta's sexy. Oh, Travolta, I'd rather have a fever than spend Saturday night with him.
Ladies, there must be something you agree on.
Of course. Wendall and Ann.
Good evening, I'm Wendall Anschutz.
And I'm Ann Peterson.
They're the first names for news in Kansas City.
Watch Wendall and Ann, weekdays at 6 and 10.
Reporter Reed Black spent several years covering Kansas City, but it was his series of reports that he did with photographers Brad Richmond and Steve DeWalt that really captured the imagination. The series was called fade to black. And some thought of it as a way of making the ordinary extraordinary, or a quirky way of looking at the world.
I had done some features, goofy features before, and then Brad arrived and we sort of teamed up, and Mr. Overbay indicated that he liked these pieces. In fact, he came up with the fade to black title and hoped that we could produce one a week, and the idea was to run them on the Friday 6 o'clock newscast as a kicker and kind of end up the week on a lighthearted, whimsical note. So Brad and I started co-producing these pieces. We did a piece called Garage Sale that I enjoyed that was a spoof on just a residential garage sale in which we end up emptying the entire house, and there's a scene of Brad ripping off a screen door and basically sold everything that was...
Including the cat.
We sold the cat.
We did dominoes, which was that was one of our major undertakings. I think we spent at least 3.5 days shooting, where we stacked up a bunch of dominoes. The idea was that this guy used dominoes to perform functions in his house.
Dig it!
And you have to keep in mind, this is all before computer graphics, so it was done the traditional way. Everything had to be done with, well, in some cases, fishing line as the toast popped out of the toaster and that sort of thing. So it was actually very grueling because we set up, I don't know how many hundreds of dominoes.
Thousands, I'm sure.
Thousands, maybe millions. I think we had 2.5 million dominoes. The most played video here was a fade to black, which was daylight savings.
Fall back. At Daylight Savings Tech, Professor Chrono drills his students relentlessly on the basics.
Spring forward, fall back. Spring forward, fall back. Spring forward, fall back. All right, students, now we're going to have a little film.
In the spring, we spring forward. In the fall, we fall back. They'll acquire knowledge that few of their contemporaries possess. Excuse me, ma'am, do you know if we're supposed to set our clocks forward or back tonight?
I have no idea. Good question.
We're supposed to set them forward.
You're sure?
Yeah.
Okay, now we're
At Tech, the students are tested and retested.
Okay, start.
On the final exam, they must correctly note that when we go to bed tonight, we should all set our clocks back 1 hour, fall back in the fall. It's a rigorous 4-year course, but time flies when you're having fun. And years later, it's fun and easy to spot a fellow Tech graduate. Excuse me, sir, are we supposed to set our clocks forward or back tonight?
Spring forward, fall back.
Amazing.
Daylight Savings Tech, class of 61.
Reed Black, KCMO TV5 News.
Makes no difference where I go, you're the best hometown I know. Hello, Kansas City. Hello, KCTV5 loves you. Makes no difference where KCTV5 loves you.
Kansas City is known for its changing weather patterns, but now we have equipment that can help forecast those changes, such as Storm Track 5 Live Power Doppler. But in the beginning, that wasn't the case.
You have to laugh when you hear Fred Brusky's name. He just makes you smile when you watched him on the weather. He would draw these little characters, which I always loved. He didn't just say it was going to rain. He would draw something on the weather map with a man with an umbrella or a duck or something that you knew it was going to rain because Fred had drawn these little characters up there.
Back when I got into television in the late 50s, we didn't have meteorologists. In the newsroom, we had regular journalists, reporters, newsmen, photographers. And then there was another class of people known as staff announcers. The staff announcers did commercials, anything that fell under the umbrella of television other than news. And that included weather. Believe it or not, staff announcers just did weather. What was there to tell about the weather? We didn't have to forecast it. We had the information come from the Weather Bureau, and we would put these little magnetic things on a board that showed sunshine and a high and low pressure system, and then we would just communicate the information from the Weather Service onto television, and that's how the weather was done in those days. One time back around 1981 or 82, the management decided, well, we've done weather inside the studio for a good number of years, let's try something different. And it was really a fun deal. They said, let's take some of our weather maps and go outside. Well, it was fun when it was 75 degrees and sunny. And there were times it was snowing. I can still remember one time we set up on Shawnee Mission Parkway around I-35, and a couple of the engineers, we had these maps in the station wagon, and we were fighting the winds and everything else, and the maps coming like this. And Wendall and Ann, they're trying to figure out if I'm going to have the show or not. I'm sticking these magnetic numbers on the board, and it's snowing. We got the show on the air, but I still don't know if we were right on the forecast or not. I'll tell you what was really funny about the weather back in those days when we just put these symbols on the board, and then all of a sudden the computers came into existence, and that was really quite a change. But the computers got this information to us so much quicker. Now, we used to have to, if we put up the 4 state temperatures, we had to go to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and put 56 up there, little letters, and then we went to Cape Girardeau and we put 75 there, and then Kansas City, we put 71. Now you push one button and instantly it's all up there, and as it changes, we get that information instantly. It's a good system we have now.
Are you Fred Brosky's daughter? I still hear it. I heard it last night. I heard it 3 times yesterday. Are you Fred Brosky's daughter?
Now people ask me, are you Julie's dad? I said, yeah, I'm Julie's dad.
It's about time.
Was on site because this guy was right there fighting for a #1 job.
2 great sports guys, no doubt about it. Don Fortune and Jack Harry, you can just say, what's happening in the world of sports today? And man, you got 30 minutes of nonstop. What's going on?
I grew up watching Don Fortune and Jack Harry, and certainly I know who Bruce Rice was. And you know, here I am, my first day, I'm having lunch with Don Fortune, and then later I met Jack, and I mean, it was a thrill to work with these guys, you know, that I had been watching really all my life. Certainly I remember Bruce Rice growing up as a kid. I mean, we always watched Channel 5, and Bruce Rice was the name in sports in town. And I remember my dad saying that, you know, if you want to do sports, you've got to be like Bruce Rice.
I remember big board sports. I remember it well because that was the time that the sports department was undoubtedly at an all-time low. These guys hated doing big board sports.
Big board sports was a lot of fun. I think Jack probably enjoyed that more than anybody else.
I can remember Jack once getting very excited as someone was sliding into third base, and he pounded so hard on the board to point this out that he actually cracked the board, and that made a big crack in the picture. Big board sports, a very forgettable time, and we were all happy to see it go, let me tell you.
There is not a nicer guy in the business than William Jackson. I don't know that I've ever met anybody who had as much fun being on TV as William Jackson. One thing that William was proudest of was probably his suits, and I think they might have messed up one of his suits on that promo shoot. You know, I think the idea was they were going to stand William in front of these guys, and the idea was they were going to kind of come close to William and you know, make it look like a tackle. Somebody decided that maybe it would look better if they just went full on right at William like a tackling dummy.
I was game with the hip. I'm thinking about my clothes, man.
Let's switch
that was a good hit. That was a good hit. That was cool.
And the camera rolled a little bit longer after the promo was done. I think that was probably the best part. It was a great time for sports in Kansas City.
Call for action. Its mission is to empower consumers by giving them a voice larger than their own. And for several years, Stan Kramer was the man you called when you needed some investigating.
And we'd investigate as long as it took. Sometimes it took months to find the truth, try to resolve these problems, and then put it on the air. The school superintendent story, Walter Marks, is probably the one that comes to mind to most people when they think, what stories did he do that made a difference? This was a school superintendent from Kansas City, Missouri, who had taken a 6 or 7 week sick leave for reportedly a bad back in Florida during the middle of winter. So in other words, we're paying for this guy to be in Florida for the winter. We're paying his salary and his expenses and whatnot because he's got a bad back and can't work here, supposedly. We went down to check out to see if he really had a bad back. And where is he? Nobody would report where he was. So we found him.
We spent several days in the Port Charlotte area last week observing Mark's activities. And while we were there, Marks was constantly on the go, spending little time at home or resting. On Tuesday, the day he returned to Kansas City, Marks returned to the condo and started loading luggage into the back of his Jeep. Now notice the cane he's laid against the left side of the back bumper. It's the first time we've seen it.
Sir, you were not walking with a cane until you went from your car to the terminal.
I was walking on a cane. I am on a cane half the time.
We did not see you for 2 days with a cane until you went to the terminal. When you got off the airplane in Kansas City, you had trouble getting to the car.
I will do some interviews with other reporters in Kansas City now to counterbalance you.
That was probably, from a career point of view, that has to be the highlight.
Kansas City can get awfully cold. In fact, it's been as cold as 23 degrees below zero. The frigid temperatures prompted this station to start a program called Heat for Life, but you know it better now as Project Warmth.
When we learned that so many people were going to be have their heat turned off in the midst of a severe winter, Phil Jones, our general manager, said, we got to do something about it. We need something done to raise money to help these people pay their gas bills and keep their heat on. Well, Phil assigned me the job of organizing a telethon. And I think in just 6 or 7 days, we were able to pull it all together.
There was this big display board, and it had a big house. And the goal was to try to fill that house with smaller houses. And each house would represent the amount of money that was donated to turn the heat back on for a family in Kansas City. And by the time we finished that broadcast, that house was full of all these little homes, all these lives, all these Kansas Cityans whose heat was put out, turned back on.
2 people who are unemployed called in with donations.
I had that too. There was one woman who was retired and pledged $5.
Is that amazing?
The news is running a little late tonight. It's 10:15. We haven't started the news yet. We will in just a few minutes. And we will continue through the news here with the telethon and after the news. I'm game if you're game. I'll stay.
Don, I'm game to stay all night long here. The way these phones have been ringing, it surprised us here at the TV station. It surprised our volunteers. We didn't have enough volunteers to start with. We started off and the phones have been constantly busy since 7 o'clock in the evening. I'm anxious to stay. You know, I'll see you at 3 o'clock in the morning if the phones keep ringing.
As long as they'll keep pledging money, you and I will be here.
A look back on some of the most memorable stories in Kansas City's history, straight ahead.
One, two, three, four, five.
Come on and give me 5, and I'll watch a while. They're the folks I like, I really like their style. Come on and give me 5, I got 5 in sight. You wanna do me right, give me 5 tonight. Give me 5, I'll be tuning in to the one I know, where I've always been. Kansas City's news, it's the news I like. Give me KCTV.
Some of the events that have helped shape Kansas City's history have also grabbed worldwide attention. Dave Helling joins us now. Dave, what were some of those stories?
Well, Katie, we went through hours of archival footage here at KCTV5, and we talked a lot about what the top stories over the last 50 years in Kansas City might be. In the end, we all agreed on this. The top Kansas City story over the last 5 decades was the collapse of the skywalks at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in July of 1981.
it was the biggest story that ever hit Kansas City, I think, without a doubt.
114 people were killed and nearly 200 hurt when the skywalks collapsed during a tea dance at the hotel. Witnesses said at the time that the walkway began to buckle and then everyone just disappeared.
I think everybody in town knew somebody who was at that tea dance that night.
The disaster prompted engineering changes across the nation. He was known as the Butcher of Kansas City, Bob Berdella. He tortured, sodomized, photographed, and killed 6 men from 1985 to 1988. Authorities had no clue of what bizarre secrets the house at 4315 Charlotte held until a man wearing only a dog collar was found running outside the home. Berdella was sentenced to life behind bars. He died 4 years into his sentence. Some say he might have been murdered. Richard Grissom is another infamous Kansas City serial killer. He is spending his life in prison for killing 3 Lenexa women. Their bodies were never found. 6 Kansas City, Missouri firefighters died in November 1988 after a fire and explosion at a construction trailer. The firefighters responded to a call of a small blaze at the trailer. The responding units drove up a small hill and parked near the site. A short time later, 40,000 pounds of highly explosive ammonium nitrate and fuel oil detonated. The 6 were killed instantly. The explosion could be heard miles away and caused structural damage within a 1-mile radius. 6 people were later found guilty in federal court of setting the original trailer fire. They are all now in prison. Cancer patients and their families were devastated when they found out that pharmacist Robert Courtney had diluted chemotherapy drugs to make money. He pled guilty to tampering with almost 100,000 prescriptions. He is currently serving a 30-year sentence.
Darryl Motley awaits, and the Kansas City Royals are world champions. Now alongside...
But the happiest moment in Kansas City history may well be the 1985 Royals World Series win, also known as the I-70 Series against the St. Louis Cardinals. The Royals were facing elimination until the 6th game. That's when George Orta was called safe at first base on a controversial call. Replays later appeared to show that Orta was actually out. But the call kept the Royals rally alive. They won Game 6 and then later Game 7 in Kansas City, giving the Royals their first and only world championship.
To be down as often as we've been down and been able to fight back, and people wrote us off all year long, but the 25 players and Dick Hauser and the coaches and the trainers and the front office, I mean, everybody's going to say this when they're world champions. They never gave up on us, and the fans are their greatest, you know. However, in this instance, it is the best. I tell you what, I wouldn't trade places with anybody in the world right now. This is the best feeling I've ever had.
Finally, the restoration of Union Station makes our list of Kansas City's biggest stories. The multi-million-dollar project brought back the landmark after years of neglect. City officials believe that Union Station is a work in progress. They continue to look for the right attraction to bring in visitors. Of course, Katie, there were other major stories we covered here at KCTV5 over the past 50 years. The long-running Kansas City, Missouri school desegregation case, for example. Corruption trials in the 1990s. Flooding has been a big story in Kansas City. The 1977 Plaza flood and major floods in 1990, 93, and again in 1998. Construction of the Truman Sports Complex was also a big issue in Kansas City, as well as the 1968 race riots, the 1976 Republican National Convention, and the Chiefs' victory in Super Bowl IV. All part of Kansas City's history and KCTV5's as well.
Makes no difference where I go, you're the best hometown I know. Hello, Kansas City. Hello, KCTV5 loves you. Makes no difference where I go, you're the best hometown I know. Hello, Kansas City. Hello, KCTV5 loves you.
Technology has certainly changed over the years in the Weather Center. We've added tools such as StormTrack 5 Live Power Doppler that actually save lives. But I still get comments on how my hair has changed over the years. And if that tickles your funny bone, take a look at this.
Hi, I'm Lily Shang.
And I'm Brian Curtis. He was Robin Williams' leading...
She describes him as a green alien with 3 eyes and 3 ears, but only 2 noses. The woman told police the intruder, who sounded like a male, broke into her apartment last night. I can't do it. Took a shot at her TV with a laser gun.
Live in New York, Andy Gobiel, KCTV5. Carolyn?
Okay, thanks, Andy. And I'll have a look at your forecast coming right up. And I'm Katie Horner. I'll have a look at your forecast coming up just after the break. And I'll have a look at your forecast coming right up. Tonight, the skies will become cloudy. You'll see the full 4, 5, 5.
Whereas in Gary, we'll have the weather. Oh, boy, it's not Gary.
Hey, come here,
Whoa!
Well, it's not the kind of day that you would... Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay, we're going to go to Mr. Food now, and he has a recipe for making ice cream.
I was in the middle of a story when I was interrupted by having to do my job.
Take 5 today takes us to Independence, to the King Louis Independence lanes, where the let's start over again. What is this called?
Of at least junior college level, and at least in one area, we just had our thing fouled up by the only automobile that went by today.
Keep it going. Absolutely. Now, what? Yes? Yes, Pam Carter, our assistant here.
Hi, Pam.
We're on the air. Did you know that?
Say hi to
Pam didn't know that. So now she wanted to get on. She's really wanted to get on TV. She's worked the parade for about 40 years now. Yes, we are.
And when it's finished, KCI will have 2 north-south runways, one going east and west.
Warm temperatures moving over Missouri and Kansas all day long today with those southerly winds. Come on.
Good evening, I'm Ann Peterson. I'm Wendall Anschutz. Ann Peterson has the night off.
I grabbed my keys instead of the little thing that I'm supposed to change my maps with.
Today's your birthday? Today's my birthday.
You guys are so mean! And now you're gonna put this on TV! I can't believe it! Got me.
And Dennis... Oh, sorry.
An excessive heat warning, it will be... Hey, let's just run the same thing we did yesterday.
Liquid PCP is a house drug which is highly corrosive.
Why don't you boys get an honest job with a newspaper?
One of the nicest things about TV5's Fred Brodsky is that Fred isn't just a weatherman, he's a weatherman. So if you were watching Fred last night, you'd know whether today was a good day to run around, or whether you're better off inside. Oh, lovely rain. Whether it's okay to ride around with the top down, or whether or not to spend a day in the park. So don't just get the weather, get the weather when the Eyewitness News team gets together.
Great day.
KCTV5 is here and going strong. We bring you live, late-breaking coverage in each of our newscasts. We're your official chief station, plus teamed with CBS, we can bring you some of the best programming available on television. But according to our general manager, Kirk Black, our commitment to you is far from over.
KCTV5 has a rich tradition of being involved with the community in Kansas City. We've been there in times of need, crisis, and we'll be there in the future. We've helped raise millions of dollars for worthy causes, from our association with Project Warmth to things like the Muscular Dystrophy Telethon, Race for the Cure, and events and worthy causes throughout the years that have let Kansas Cityans know that we care. It's something that we're very proud of in our history. Thanks, Kansas City, for making this an unbelievable 50 years at KCTV.
Thanks for spending the past hour with us walking down memory lane. Since KCTV5's infancy as KCMO, the employees here have taken pride in broadcasting a product that they're proud of. It's been a great 50 years for us, and we're looking forward to the next 50. Good night.
Happy anniversary to KCTV5, but we really wouldn't be here celebrating without you, those of you at home, our viewers who have been watching, our customers, and our friends. So as I say happy anniversary to our television station, I also say thank you for being at home and supporting us and being our friends.
I love Channel 5. I think it's a neat place.
Great folks, great memories, great television station.
Congratulations on 50 years and keep up the good work.
So, happy birthday, Channel 5, KCTV. We wish you another great 50 years.
Kansas City is a great town, KCTV is a great station, and once again, my congratulations for 50 years of broadcast excellence.
Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to TV5, happy birthday to you.